Who was Pol Pot, and why is his name etched in the annals of history? To begin to understand, we must journey back to the early years of his life. Born as Saloth Sar in the verdant rice fields of Cambodia, he was the product of a simple farming family. His early years were steeped in tradition, as he received his primary education within the sacred walls of a Buddhist monastery. This spiritual foundation was soon overlaid with a Western influence, as he continued his studies in French Catholic institutions. Here, the young Saloth Sar was exposed to a world beyond the rice fields of his homeland, fostering an intellectual curiosity that would later fuel his radical ideologies. The boy who once toiled in the fields and studied religious texts was slowly transforming, his life taking a course that would ripple through history. From these humble beginnings, who could have predicted the path that Saloth Sar, later known as Pol Pot, would take? But how did this simple farm boy become Pol Pot the dictator? Our journey takes us to Paris in the early 1950s, where Saloth Sar, later known as Pol Pot, was studying radio electronics on a scholarship. However, his interests soon veered off track, leading him into the bustling world of French communist circles. Here, he was introduced to the ideas of Marxism and Leninism, and their potential for societal transformation. This young man from rural Cambodia found himself drawn to these radical ideologies. He began to envision a Cambodia free from class divisions, where the rural peasantry would hold power. This was the birthplace of his revolutionary ideals, a stark contrast to the quiet life he had once known. In Paris, Pol Pot also formed connections with other like-minded Cambodian students. Together, they started to sketch the blueprint of a new Cambodia, influenced by their shared belief in communist principles. This group would later evolve into the infamous Khmer Rouge. Pol Pot's time in Paris was more than just an educational sojourn. It was a period of radicalization, a forging of his political identity. The ideologies he embraced, the connections he formed, and the revolutionary ideals he nurtured would all play a crucial role in shaping his future. These experiences would lay the groundwork for Pol Pot's transformation and his future regime. Pol Pot's radical ideas didn't remain just ideas for long. The seeds of his radicalism found fertile ground in the political turmoil that was Cambodia in the mid-20th century. After spending time in France and becoming enamored with Marxist ideologies, he returned to Cambodia with a burning desire to ignite a revolution. In the years following his return, Pol Pot became deeply involved in the formation of the Khmer Rouge, an insurgent group that was born out of dissatisfaction with the ruling government. This group was a melting pot of discontent, comprised of intellectuals, peasants, and former government officials, all united under the banner of opposition. The Khmer Rouge, guided by Pol Pot's vision of a classless agrarian utopia, began to grow in strength and influence. They capitalized on the political disarray of the time, positioning themselves as the champions of the downtrodden and the dispossessed. The more the country descended into chaos, the more the Khmer Rouge's ranks swelled with new recruits. Pol Pot's charisma and his promise of a better future for Cambodia resonated with many. He was seen as a beacon of hope in a country that was rapidly spiraling out of control. However, beneath this veneer of hope, there was a darker reality. Pol Pot's vision was not one of peace and prosperity, but one of radical change that would come at a great human cost. The political turmoil in Cambodia, exacerbated by the Vietnam War and the subsequent power vacuum left by the deposed Prince Sihanouk, created the perfect storm for the rise of the Khmer Rouge. They seized this opportunity, using the instability to their advantage. Their influence grew, their ranks swelled, and their grip on the country tightened. Against the backdrop of a nation in chaos, Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge were poised to seize power. The stage was set for one of the darkest chapters in human history, a reign of terror that would leave a lasting scar on Cambodia and the world. With the Khmer Rouge in power, Pol Pot's reign of terror began. Underneath the deceptive veneer of a utopian agrarian society, Pol Pot and his Khmer Rouge enacted policies that would culminate in one of the most brutal genocides of the 20th century. At the heart of this regime was a ruthless pursuit of an extreme form of agrarian communism, where all citizens were forced to become laborers in collective farms. The cities were emptied, their inhabitants marched to the countryside to work in what were essentially slave labor camps. Intellectuals, professionals, even those who simply wore eyeglasses, were targeted, seen as threats to the new order. In Pol Pot's Cambodia, to be educated was to be the enemy. No one was safe from the purges. Accusations of disloyalty, real or imagined, were met with swift and brutal repercussions. Families were torn apart, children were indoctrinated and turned into soldiers. Fear and suspicion became a part of daily life. Neighbors turned on neighbors, friends on friends, all in the name of survival. But survival was far from guaranteed. The regime's economic policies led to widespread famine. The once thriving rice fields of Cambodia lay wasted while its people starved. Hospitals and schools were abandoned, replaced by prisons and execution centers. The infamous S-21 prison in Phnom Penh became a symbol of the regime's brutality, where thousands were tortured and killed. The genocide that unfolded was devastating. It is estimated that up to 2 million Cambodians, nearly a quarter of the population, perished under Pol Pot's rule. They were victims of execution, starvation, disease, overwork. Their bodies filled mass graves, now known as the killing fields. The Khmer Rouge's reign of terror was not only about physical destruction, it was an assault on the very fabric of Cambodian society. Religion, culture, tradition, all were suppressed. Buddhism was banned, temples destroyed, monks defrocked. The Khmer language was manipulated, its words twisted to serve the propaganda of the regime. The family unit, the cornerstone of Cambodian society, was dismantled. Children were taken from their parents, taught to revere the state above all else. In the midst of this darkness, there were acts of resistance, of bravery, of humanity. Stories of people risking their lives to protect their loved ones, of communities banding together in secret to preserve their traditions, of individuals standing up against the regime's atrocities. But these stories were the exception, not the norm. Pol Pot's reign was a dark period of Cambodian history, marked by unimaginable suffering and loss. A reign that left a deep scar on the Cambodian landscape, a wound that is still healing. A reign that serves as a stark reminder of the depths to which humanity can sink, but also a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. But like all tyrants, Pol Pot's reign couldn't last forever. By the late 70s, Pol Pot's brutal regime was starting to crumble. The Khmer Rouge's radical policies had isolated the country internationally, and the mass atrocities had provoked outrage around the globe. The regime's downfall, however, was precipitated not by international action, but by a conflict closer to home. In 1978, relationships between Cambodia and Vietnam, its neighbor to the east, began to sour. The Khmer Rouge had been conducting cross-border raids into Vietnamese territory, and Vietnam, already battle-hardened from years of war, retaliated. The Vietnamese launched a full-scale invasion of Cambodia in December 1978, marking the beginning of the end for Pol Pot's regime. The Khmer Rouge was no match for the Vietnamese forces. By January 1979, Vietnamese troops had taken Phnom Penh, the capital, and Pol Pot's reign of terror was effectively over. However, Pol Pot himself was nowhere to be found. He had fled into the jungles of western Cambodia, where he would remain in hiding for the next 2 decades. In these years of seclusion, Pol Pot lived a life drastically different from the one he had known as the leader of the Khmer Rouge. He was a fugitive, constantly on the move, evading capture by those who sought to bring him to justice. Despite international efforts to locate him, Pol Pot managed to evade capture until his death in 1998. His death marked the end of a grim chapter in Cambodia's history, but the legacy of his reign continues to haunt the nation. The atrocities committed under his regime resulted in the death of an estimated 2 million people, a quarter of the Cambodian population, leaving deep scars that persist to this day. Pol Pot's legacy is a chilling reminder of the horrors that unchecked power and radical ideologies can unleash. So why should we remember Pol Pot? His reign, filled with terror, left indelible scars on Cambodia. The genocide he orchestrated decimated a generation, affecting the country's demographics even today. His policies crippled the economy, a setback from which Cambodia is still struggling to recover. The cultural devastation, the loss of intellectuals, artists, and free thinkers, has left a void that echoes in the heart of the nation. Remembering Pol Pot and his regime is crucial, not as a tribute to the man, but as a stark reminder of the brutality humanity is capable of, and the resilience it takes to rebuild in the aftermath.